world. I'm Mike Foy, this year's president, and it's a privilege to be able to open what is the first mid-year members forum, and also the first one that's been open to all members, not just forum representatives. We've got an interesting agenda ahead of us, dealing with very topical issues that affect us all, not least of which is the subject of sustainability, a very prominent topic this week as world leaders gather in Scotland for COP26. Later today, I'll share a panel discussion on the critical challenges and opportunities that we face in the built environment. Tomorrow, we'll be turning our attention to technology and innovation. My hope is that at the end of the next 2 days, you feel your attendance has been worthwhile and that you're able to take away knowledge which will enable you all to be good ambassadors for CIOB. Around the world, we've got a vast amount of knowledge which as members we can utilise to influence all those we come into contact with, so that we fulfil our commitments to work for the public benefit as set out in our Royal Charter. I think that's enough for me as an introduction. I just want to invite Kye Gbangbola, Chief Executive of CIOB, to join me for a short and hopefully interesting discussion with her. Good morning, Caroline.
Good morning, Mike. It's lovely to see you, and it's so nice. We were actually able to go out and do a real live member visit last week at TfL in London. So it's great, lovely to see you today. And like you, I'm absolutely delighted that we can welcome not just our very important forum members, but also any member around the world who care to join us. So that's great news. So Mike, you've been president now for coming on nearly 6 months, but before that you've been a CIOB member for many years. So I'm just going to ask you, what originally attracted you to CIOB and what's maintained your interest?
Yeah, an interesting question, Caroline. I left school at 16 actually, and got a craft apprenticeship with a local builder, so I didn't have the benefit, that's if it is a benefit, of going to university. I've always had a burning desire to learn about how things are manufactured, and in the case of construction, how those components are actually put together. As a part-time student, I was attracted by what CIOB called the ladder of opportunity, which meant that anyone leaving school and choosing the construction industry as a career could become a member and progress through the various grades, which is exactly what I did. I actually started as a technician member many years ago. As for maintaining my interest, CIOB's always had a reputation for producing practical guidance across a range of subjects, and it was a key source of information for me to keep me up to date. Because remember, in those days, with no computers, with no internet, so access to learning material wasn't so easy, and CIOB helped me to fill that knowledge gap at that time. I became involved with CIOB more at a regional level by being an active member in one of the regions in the UK, mainly around the city of Liverpool. About 10 years ago, I became a trustee, which in a way rejuvenated my interest and gave me an opportunity to shape the strategic direction of the organisation, for which I've had a passion throughout my membership. I've got to say my enthusiasm for CIOB remains as bright now as it ever was. And as we look forward, I frequently wish I was younger, actually. Yes, we have many challenges, but you know what? We've got some great opportunities ahead of us. I say to all members that the future with CIOB is very bright, and the respect for us and the influence we can have in advising governments across the globe is increasing, and I believe will continue. I think that's enough on that question, Caroline. If I can move on to ask you one, what is your favourite part of your role as Chief Executive Officer, and why?
Okay, thank you, Mike. Well, first of all, can I just say, wow, to go from technician grade to president is something that I'm sure you and I know your family are very, very proud of, and you are absolutely an example to all of us of true professionalism. And it's a great pleasure working with you. So thank you for that introduction. So to answer your question, what's the favourite part, if you like, of my role with CIOB and why? Well, it has to be working with the members. I'm very privileged. I've started to travel again, not just around the UK and Ireland, but overseas as well. And it's not just meeting the members and understanding the journey that got them to CIOB, but it's actually listening to their views on CIOB, what we're doing, what we should be doing. I'm always very inspired and humbled. And I think it's really, really important that I do listen. Otherwise, if you're just internally focused, you can drift off and you can actually put a lot of effort into doing things that you think the members will want. The important thing is to listen and respond. And it's also working with the board of trustees, because with over 45,000 members at very different stages of their careers, with very different backgrounds, interests, if you can imagine, we get really sometimes an initiative overload, because the enthusiasms of the members in the different hubs, we could scatter and really reduce our global impact. So working with the board of trustees, agreeing a work plan, which in this case, we're in year 2 of our corporate plan, it actually helps us to stay and deliver what we commit. Now, it may not please all the members all the time, because everyone's got their own focal points, but it really is that member engagement. And what really, really is my very proudest moments is welcoming new members, new fellows at the graduation ceremonies. It's a truly humbling and inspiring event. Sorry if that was a long answer, but I'm very enthusiastic, as you can tell, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for that, Karen. You've hit the important point there, and that's it. That is about listening to members, and it is about taking their views on board. At the end of the day, they are the institute, and that is so important. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Mike. So look, I know what you've been doing over the last few months, and I know we've kept you incredibly busy. It's only a few months, but I know you've been busy, and some of our delegates today, I'm sure, would be very interested to find out what have the headlines been so far since you've been president, and what are your plans going forward?
Yeah, another interesting question. Because the new president takes over in June, the first couple of months, I've got to say, felt a little bit quiet. Apart from the ongoing work that I have been involved in and still involved in with CIOB prior to becoming president, I think the main headline for me that I would mention is standing in front of approximately 750 construction colleagues at the UK Construction Manager of the Year Awards in London at the end of September. It's a proud moment, and it was for me certainly, to have the opportunity to represent the Institute at that annual event, and also to have a part to play in the introduction of 2 new awards this year. That was to follow the Rising Star Award of last year. The 2 new awards this year were Client of the Year and Team of the Year, a real passion of mine, because construction is complex, and without good teamwork, we wouldn't achieve what we do achieve across the globe. The other features I've been really pleased to have been involved in relates to our global membership. As some members may be aware, we now have on a regular basis virtual engagement meetings with all international super regions. To have been involved in such meetings with New York and Caribbean, Oceania, and then nearer to the UK, Ireland super region a few weeks ago, is a real privilege, and I believe an essential part of ensuring that we maintain our focus on international membership and that we continue to develop it and maintain it. I've got to say, the enthusiasm and commitment I see by attending those meetings, along with you, Caroline, and your senior leadership team, is outstanding. No one should be in any doubt about the massive resource of international knowledge and experience that we have within our own membership. It is very, very impressive. As some members know, my main theme for this year is around the role of the client, and I'm currently chairing a working group developing a global client strategy. The overall aim is to enable CIOB to become the global professional body of choice for construction clients. That is a very big ambition. There's no doubt about that, but it's an important initiative for CIOB and one which will run for a number of years beyond my term in office as president, until hopefully it becomes the norm and within the business as usual processes within CIOB. Also on a UK level, I'm eager to visit as many regions as I'm able to in the limited time available. People used to say to me, Mike, your year goes very quickly, and I can vouch for that. It is going very, very quickly. As I mentioned earlier, the regions is where I spent my formative CIOB activities, and I still see the enthusiasm in the regions that I saw in those days, and long may that continue, and long may it continue across the world with our global membership. I think that's about it on that one, Caroline. So
great, thank you very much. And I agree. I've been so pleased that the one positive to come out of COVID for us was the ability to jump on platforms and meet with our members around the world in live time. So hopefully, we're much closer. We know what the issues are. We can respond. I think the communication has improved. It's never perfect. Wherever you go, you can never communicate enough, but I think it has had a step change in this last 18 months or so. So thanks, Mike. Now a big question. If you had the ability to change one thing in the industry, what would you want to see?
I'd love to see the industry becoming the profession of choice for many, and to be as attractive to school leavers as it was to me. I'm afraid that too many people still have a view that the construction industry is a career that young people go into when they're not sure what they want to do, or because it's a second choice, or even because they aren't clever enough to do other things. I hear all sorts of messages, and some from my education colleagues, not in CIOB, but elsewhere, I hasten to add. I want to see young people and the not so young choosing construction as their first choice for a career. The construction industry has changed dramatically over the last couple of decades, and I believe that changing process will continue, but at an increasing rate. It's my hope that with the introduction of digitalisation, the use of modern methods of construction and factory-produced buildings, which are then assembled on site, that will wipe away the image that we've had for far too long and has influenced so many, resulting in them deciding to choose other careers rather than construction. I want to see trusting relationships between all members of the construction management team, so that a one team approach, that is client and contractor, working seamlessly together, so that all our buildings are constructed with our Royal Charter principles of the public good in mind. Out of this, I hope will flow public recognition of the great work that the construction industry is involved in, and this in turn will make the industry more attractive as a career. Linked to what I've just said, I'd like to see a change in the way that CIOB is viewed by some professional colleagues. There are other professional bodies that people may choose to be members of. Indeed, there will be some on this call today who have membership of other professional bodies, and that's great. But for too long, CIOB has been seen by some as an institute that's for the builders, not other professionals who operate across the range of construction management activities, and that's a real disappointment for me. CIOB has a very ambitious programme of initiatives ongoing at present, which I hope and believe will start to turn the dial on this and gain us greater recognition. I could go on, Caroline, but they are heartfelt thoughts about what I would like to see change in the industry. I think it's going that way. It's taking time, and it will take a lot more hard work.
Great, thank you. It's very heartfelt. Thank you very much, Mike, for that.
I think I've got a final question to ask you, Caroline. What would you like everyone to get out of attending Members Forum? They're taking time out of work. They may have other commitments. What would you like to see them getting out of it?
Thank you. Well, first of all, obviously, being a professional institute, I really do hope that everybody investing time feel inspired, feel that they've learned something, maybe opened up their thinking to a topic they hadn't previously considered. I'm absolutely delighted that we're getting inputs globally, so it's not just a UK-centric members forum, and that's one of the great things now. We can start to really build our network. I hope that for some of our members on today, maybe they haven't been involved in members forum before, maybe it will make them think perhaps there's more they would like to do with their local hubs, and even for some maybe to actually take that step and apply to be on one of our committees or to become a trustee. So really, I think that be inspired, I hope, as well as find out about what we're doing. We have got a members forum website where you can get updates about our corporate plan, but this members forum is really about what's going on in the industry rather than the normal governance type activities. So thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Caroline. I think that's the end of the conversation that
I
you
think
and
it
I have.
is. Yeah,
I hope members have got something from that and got to know me a little bit better, and perhaps got to know you a little bit better and
great.
what you're thinking. That's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I know we're going to see you right through the next 2 days. So thank you very much, Mike. Much appreciated. Now it's my great pleasure to welcome Kye Gbangbola, who's worked with CIOB over many years. I'm going to invite Kye to the stage, who will open our next session. Hello, nice to see you, Kye. This is a really important session, and it's very topical, but one that CIOB are really going to be putting in the heart of our next corporate plan. For the future, it's really important we do that. So the title is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And Kye, I'm going to hand over to you. You're the expert here. You and your panel. I look forward to seeing you the other end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I'm very much appreciated, and thank you for the introduction. Hello, and a very warm welcome to this discussion on how the CIOB can embrace and facilitate the UN 2030 Agenda and its Sustainable Development Goals. Members, the Industrial Revolution that we are in marks the biggest opportunity in history. Systemic change is afoot in every sector, from space travel to coffee. People, the environment, and investors demand change in the ways that we do business. My name's Kye Gbangbola, and I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Building and a sustainability ambassador. It is my great pleasure to be your chair for this event. I have been part of this great institution nearly 35 years, and I am really pleased to say that I've met a lot of great members along the way. I'm a published author of 2 books on gold standard sustainability. One has a section on sustainable development goals. My company was the official corporate sustainability reporting consultant to the London 2012 Sustainable Olympic Games. So you see, as they say, I've got some skin in the game. This event is for CIOB members and especially representatives of the CIOB hub committees, employer engagement groups, tomorrow's leaders, CIOB officers, trustees, and the leadership team. But suffice to say, you are all welcome. This presentation will be recorded, and at the end of the event, you may receive an email asking for your feedback. Recordings will be available on the CIOB's Academy. My main speaker today is David Stockdale. David will give a comprehensive explanation of the importance of the UN Sustainable Development Goals for the CIOB's global work around sustainability to ensure that we achieve global impact as an industry. Our panelists today, we know Eddie Tuttle, our Director of Policy, Public Affairs and Research, who provides our management team with strategic advice and guidance. Eddie works closely with government ministers, senior civil servants, and a variety of regulatory and legislative bodies. Our panelists also include our illustrious Senior Vice President, Michael Yam, 36 years in construction and real estate across the UK, Malaysia, Australia, Mauritius, and South Africa. This global conversation is founded on where to invest, based on organisations and their sustainability contributions. So this is undoubtedly right up Michael Yam's street. So today, my friends, we have a few of the CIOB's finest to put your questions and queries to. Please get your live questions in as early as possible to avoid disappointment. As chair, I'm very much looking forward to dropping into the conversation a few questions of my own. It's a really great subject. The UN Sustainable Development Goals aims to deliver prosperity for all on a healthy planet. They are premised on the pledge that no one gets left behind. They are encapsulated in 17 goals that have 169 targets and 230 indicators to measure progress on performance. Suffice to say, the UN Sustainable Development Goals are one of the most important topics of the day, at the forefront of any sizable organisation's chief executive's mind. To determine which sustainable goals apply to your organisation, they should not be cherry-picked to avoid what is called sustainable goal washing. They are actually determined by a process of stakeholder engagement, materiality, management, approach, and performance disclosure, and that must all be learnt. The focus is global policy to local action. It is top of the agenda at COP, and we want to involve you in the discussion because future prosperity will depend on you and your organisations being able to demonstrate that you are part of the solution. In the week that the government launched Greening Finance, a roadmap to sustainable investing, and a few months before, the Chancellor announced mandatory corporate reporting for all organisations in the UK and for their international operations. What this does is it triples down on the need to measure and disclose environmental social governance, ESG performance, because this will form the basis of investor decision making for us and for our clients. So this is an opportune time for this particular conversation. To be clear about what's at stake, if we become sustainable, we all win. If we remain unsustainable, we all lose. And this brings me neatly to our chat today. Our mission members is to respond to our real issues, like why should the construction industry miss out on the benefits of sustainable development? We didn't on the Olympics, and that was a decade ago. So no pressure. Let's talk about UN Sustainable Development Goals that leave no one behind. Some of you may know our key speaker. It's David Stockdale. He's a fellow of the CIOB and a member of the CIOB Policy Board. He is also a chartered environmentalist and founder of Brigger Consulting. David's extensive experience of major infrastructure, building and community regeneration projects brings him face to face with the Sustainable Development Goal issues that we all encounter in our work in the sector. And we all must find solutions that bring a transformational shift in business thinking. So, over to you, David, and members, please sit back, relax, and enjoy David's presentation.
Hello and welcome to today's presentation. My name is Dave Stockdale and I'd like to introduce you to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and also the potential of their framework to be the CIOB's new moral compass. Today's presentation is in two parts, and its purpose is to initially review the Sustainable Development Goals framework, to subsequently explore how the CIOB could use this framework for the benefit of its global membership moving forward. A blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all. The Sustainable Development Goals were agreed in 2015. And the key words for me on this slide are transforming our world, a global commitment, a bottom-up process, and that national strategies are required. SDGs are a special kind of policy, a hybrid form of governance arrangement. Again, the key words for me on this slide are open framework, and also it's up to the national governments to apply the framework to their specific contexts. That is to connect the dots. So what do we mean connect the dots in the context of a national framework? It means being able to associate one goal with another and to find the big picture for a particular country in terms of their specific needs. The CIOB should adopt the goals framework, mapping its current and future policies to individual goals, demonstrating their commitment to the goals and strengthening their global influence as a result. The CIOB's mission is to contribute to the creation of a modern, progressive and responsible construction industry, able to meet the economic, environmental and social challenges faced in the 21st century. The CIOB's values are about creating extraordinary people through professional learning and continuous professional development. The mission and values of the goals complement the CIOB mission, values and moral expectations of our global membership. The 17 goals as a package indicate a working definition of what sustainable development is. They're close to the concept of a green economy, and they are meant to be integrated and implemented together. They are an open framework with some predefined variables in the form of goals, targets and indicators for measurement. It's up to the national governments to apply the framework to their specific contexts. The goals state a number of problems to be solved individually in each country. The strategies are up to individual governments to design within the global framework. The relevant question is not what should be done, the question is how. The goals are highly complex and are about highly contested political issues which need to be discussed and addressed within the individual countries. The main message of Goal 1 is that economic growth is important and that discrimination of the poor must end. Looking at this slide, just consider just how big Africa is. Africa's landmass is just about as big as that of China, India, Western and Eastern Europe, the United States and Japan combined. This goal focuses on hunger, which is closely related to the issue of extreme poverty, which is Goal 1. It points to factors to increase food production, but within environmental limits. It is in this sense parallel to Goals 8 and 9. About a third of all food that is produced globally is lost to pests or spoilage in the supply chain or as consumer waste. Preventing just a quarter of this loss could feed nearly 1 billion people a year, save nearly £250 billion, and significantly reduce global greenhouse gas emissions as a result. When people are in good health, societies prosper. This goal states a number of health-related problems. However, it offers little in terms of how to solve these problems. This slide really poses no great surprises. In high-income countries, the majority of people who die are old, but in low-income countries, children under the age of 5 account for 1 in 3 deaths. Goal 4 is all about ensuring everyone has access to learn, no matter who they are or where they are. Overall, the trend is upwards from the 1970s. And in terms of post-secondary and upper secondary pupils, no education, as you can see from the right-hand side, has reduced significantly. Goal 5 is targeted on achieving gender equality. That is, equal access to education, healthcare and decent work, which can only benefit societies. Women average 2.6 times as much time on unpaid care and domestic work as men do. This goal has strong links to the environmental goals. It states the desired ends and suggests some means to achieve them, primarily management systems and protection of ecosystems. Globally, 60% of people use sanitation facilities that are not safely managed and may contribute to the spread of disease. Much of the world's fresh water is polluted. Energy is the dominant contributor to climate change, accounting for around 60% of total global greenhouse gas emissions. Goal 7 is connected to Goals 1, 9, 12 and 13. Goal 7 focuses on clean and renewable energy, but gives only a few suggestions on what needs to be done, apart from some support for developing countries. Energy is typically measured in watts. Unfortunately, 1 watt is an incredibly small number, and so to make energy numbers usable, engineers use multiples of 1,000 watts. For example, kilo, mega, giga, and tera. A terawatt is 1,000 gigawatts and is used to describe country-level consumption. Whereas a gigawatt of energy will run a mid-sized city, a kilowatt of energy would run a house. When you look at this slide, you can see that in 2019, oil and gas dominate. However, oil is pretty flat, but coal has dramatically reduced and gas has increased since the 1970s to the present day. Goal 8 takes a strong position in favour of economic development and spells out some of the factors which are important for the national economy. Productivity, entrepreneurship and employment are 3 key factors. The goal also points out restriction in terms of reducing the burden on the environment. The poorest 50% of the world's population is responsible for just 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. The poorest countries are often the most likely to experience the worst effects of the climate crisis and have done the least to cause it. Goal 9, in simple terms, states that for a society to grow, it should encourage industries that bring opportunities to everyone while protecting the environment. It's also very similar to Goal 8 in that it outlines important factors for economic growth and balances this with concerns for the environment. The number of internet users in Africa almost doubled in the past 4 years, but more than 4 billion people do not use the internet, and 90% of them are from the developing world. Goal 10 seeks to make sure everyone, everywhere, has a chance to live a healthy and happy life. The developed world versus the developing world is sharply depicted on this slide. Half of humanity, some 3.5 billion people, lives in cities today, but 828 million people live in slums, and the number keeps rising. This goal is a bridge between the social dimension and the environmental dimension. It states a few ends to be achieved and suggests some means to do this, mainly by support for developing countries and strengthened planning. Goal 11 is connected to goals 3, 6, 10 and 12. The speed of urban growth is mind-boggling. By 2060, the world's building stock is projected to double. That's like putting up a city like New York every month for 40 years. And it's mainly because of growth in developing countries like China, India and Nigeria. Even if the rich world could magically get to net zero today, the rest of the world will still be emitting more and more. Cities occupy 1% of the world's land, yet are home to about 55% of the human population. Cities account for 75% of total energy consumption and 80% of total carbon emissions. In 2017, there were 29 cities with more than 10 million people. By 2030, there will be 43 of them, and 14 will be home to more than 20 million. Goal 12 is connected to goals 6, 7, 11 and 15. Goal 12 wants us to make us think twice about the things we use, the waste we create, and how that impacts our planet, changing our behaviour towards more sustainable actions. The largest middle-class consumer market today is in the United States and Western Europe. The largest middle-class consumer market projected to be in 2030 will be China. Households consume 29% of global energy, contributing 21% of global CO2 emissions. The true source of greenhouse gas emissions essentially comes down to unsustainable human behaviour. This goal is connected to goals 3, 7, 8 and 12. Goal 13 is about finding solutions like renewable energy and clean technologies to fix climate change. But it also will take actions from governments, the private sector and civil society to make a significant impact. There are two numbers you ought to know about the climate. 51 billion is how many tons of greenhouse gases the world typically adds to the atmosphere each year, and net zero is where we need to get to. Something like 20% of the carbon dioxide emitted today will still be there in the atmosphere in 10,000 years. The wealthiest 10% of people in the world are responsible for 50% of global emissions. The biggest emitter today is China, but over the past century, most greenhouse gases have come from the developed economies of Europe and North America. This slide shows us the consequences of inertia and how dangerous global greenhouse gas emissions will be to our planet. It should concentrate people's minds. Goal 14 is about protecting the oceans, seas and all its species. Oceans cover 75% of the Earth's surface, contain 97% of the Earth's water and represent 99% of the living space on the planet by volume. 2015 data on primary plastic production by industrial sector place packaging at 146 million tonnes top of the list. Second was building and construction at 65 million tonnes per year. Textiles at 59 million tonnes and the other sectors at 47 million tonnes. 8.3 billion metric tonnes of plastic that we have ever produced still exists, and roughly 75% of it has become plastic waste. Of that amount, less than 10% has been recycled. We're all part of the global ecosystem. Goal 15 is about making sure that we stop all the things that threaten our global home. This includes deforestation, land degradation, and the loss of animal and plant species. Around 1.6 billion people depend on forests for their livelihood. This includes 70 million indigenous people. And forests are home to more than 80% of all animals and plants. Agriculture plays a huge part in the build-up of global greenhouse gases. For example, 33% of the grain produced across the world is used to feed livestock, and 70 billion animals are raised every year for human consumption. Forests are vital to the Earth's climate, but they have been disappearing fast. By 2011, 50% of the world's original forests had been cut down by humans, mostly to create space for new farmland. 37% of the world's habitable land is forest, and between 1990 and 2015 we lost 880 football pitches worth of forest every hour. Goal 16 is about finding ways to make sure everyone lives in a peaceful society and don't have to live in fear. The goal can be read as support for the general idea that good governance and state capacity is important for development and for policies in general. Please know that this is a perception index only. To make all the goals a reality will require the participation of everyone. That includes governments, the private sector, civil society, organisations such as the CIOB. The population of the Earth is predicted to stabilise at 11 billion in 2100. There are 8 times as many people on Earth today as there were 200 years ago. China, with a population of 1.4 billion, has more people than any other country. India, currently at 1.35 billion population, is growing fast and is expected to overtake that of China. Goals 1, 8, 9 and 10 are primarily focused on the economy. These goals talk about the means to reduce poverty, that is to increase wealth in poor countries. The implicit assumption underlying the goals is that the only viable route moving forward is to reduce carbon emissions, eliminate global poverty, and ensure that the development is sustainable. The goals are not accompanied by an examination whether, assuming they are achieved, that they are sustainable. Sustainable economic growth requires a different measure than the traditional GDP, one that is more sensitive to our impact on our natural assets that results from our current unsustainable consumerism, that has the viewpoint that we are external somehow to the natural world and not actually embedded within it. Our current stance has given rise to a paradox, that growth in global GDP is seen as necessary for providing funds that will be needed for reducing our ecological footprint, our impact on the planet. Even though growth in global GDP is known to increase the ecological footprint. However, new frameworks for measuring economic progress are being developed, in many cases through the United Nations, for example, for natural capital accounting and assessments. There are 7 goals which address social issues. Goals 2 to 7 and 11. These social goals can be read as illustrations of the specific problems which affect people who live in poverty. However, some of them are clearly relevant for rich countries. These goals are more focused on ends than on means, especially in comparison to the goals on the economic dimension. There are 4 goals which relate to traditional environmental concerns, goals 12 to 15. The environmental goals contain a list of ends to be achieved and relate to some key behaviour, such as production and consumption, as well as to nature in a broad sense, climate, land and sea. The environmental goals makes reference to economic resources as a means to solve some of the problems, for example through technological development. In other words, economic activity is a problem as well as a solution to the environmental problems. This is a fundamental dilemma, and there is little explicit guidance in the goals on how to deal with this dilemma. The final 2 goals, 16 and 17, highlight overlapping issues which can be interpreted as prerequisites to reach other goals. They address issues of implementation, especially the role of governments and the role of international support. The international support relates to important issues to help developing countries catch up with the developed countries, such as technology development and capacity building. There is a problem with the goals. They are not accompanied by an economic analysis that examines whether once they are achieved, that they are sustainable. We simply have to move away from the current viewpoint that humanity is external to the natural world. That is business as usual, that extracts from nature's goods and services, then transforms them for our unsustainable lifestyles, and then discharging our production and consumption back into nature's waste. There has to be a recognition that we humans are embedded in the natural world. This change in economic viewpoint will guide our conception of future economic strategic possibilities. National accounting systems do not track humanity's use of nature's goods and services. GDP does not record the depreciation nor possible appreciation of nature's capital, such as water quality, soils, minerals, plants, air, animals, food, health, and coastal protection. The goals have to be general to apply to all countries, which means there is a need to adjust the goals to the specific situation in each country. It becomes necessary for national governments to adopt the general framework to the local circumstances in their nations. We're now coming to the end of part 1 of the presentation. Looking at this slide is a message that is loud and clear. It's our impact on the environment that has resulted in this situation. Our unsustainable consumerism. It's down to us. Welcome to part 2 of my presentation. The world is changing drastically before our eyes. Will the CIOB be prepared for what comes next? We need to think about working out the how for the CIOB, for example, strategic alliances, partnerships, and capacity building in knowledge and best practice. In what way? What's the route, the method, techniques and processes involved? In what manner? What's the style, the modus operandi? And by what means? Resources and expertise. The CIOB is a global brand and is trusted. It has a global reputation and professional membership that influence and reach out. It has a new governance structure and is an industry leader in digitalisation of the construction process through BIM. Our codes of practice influence the construction industry in best practice in terms of project management and development, design management, quality, and other important subjects such as site management and the new International Certificate in Construction Management. It also highlights the social value of construction. The CIOB infrastructure, for example, the CPD Academy, is second to none. Its collective knowledge and intellectual capital throughout the CIOB organisation is a positive strength. There is an increasing acceptance of the need to ensure construction projects provide social value rather than simply economic value. If you look at bullet point 5. So how is the construction industry developing and supporting social enterprise and social value, and for whom? How and when is the industry recording and measuring social value and its effect? Which organisations are doing things well, and what can we learn from our experiences globally? There are 3 weaknesses, in my view, on this list. The first is a general lack of awareness in the CIOB of the United Nations goals. This despite their creation since 2015, some 6 years ago. It is a weakness because a lot's happened in those 6 years in terms of developing the goals and reviewing the goals. So it's imperative that this general lack of awareness should be addressed. The second weakness, a myopic view, is basically stating, are we anchored within the United Kingdom and the UK, for example, house building sector? 10 years ago, we had very strong links with the Chinese construction industry and a Chinese national as our president. Since then, we appear, perception is everything, that we are moving backwards within the borders of the UK. And the question is, are we shapers of the built environmental landscape, or just a figure in that landscape? The final bullet point basically states a lack of ambition regarding a proactive global influence on shaping the future in adapting to climate change. We have to learn pretty quickly in terms of the issues, the science, and the implications for the built environment and the global built environment in order to raise the game in terms of catching up on learning what the influences that we can address and promote for the CIOB for the Sustainable Development Goals. The caveat there being the goals that are relevant to the global built environment. We live in a global community and we have a global membership. Is the CIOB critically reviewing its global role and the aspiration of its stated mission and values? That's the question. So what are the opportunities for the CIOB? These are 4 key themes that I think that the CIOB can take as opportunities in terms of strategy and policy. The first bullet point basically deals with 2 key stakeholders for the future. school children who will inherit what we do today, and the millennials, the people who have to deliver the carbon transition economy and be prepared for climate change mitigation. What's stopping the CIOB professionals doing their CPD by getting involved with school children, forming partnerships with schools, leading projects, leading presentations to all interested parties? It's the school children who will inherit what we do today, and the millennials who will have to deal with it. Also, forming strategic partnerships with the sustainable finance community and impact investors is critical, in my opinion. The strategic advantage of that is that by equipping our professionals to help their professionals to achieve what they will be forced to have to deal with in terms of targets, stakeholder investors, impact investors and the like. It has to be done, and it has to be done quickly, but we have to be credible. We want them to come to us, and that could be done through the CIOB Academy, through courses, etc. Following on from that, the third bullet point, I believe we need to create a new CIOB qualification. Environmental, social and governance, ESG. We need to become a key critical friend to the key stakeholders in sustainable finance and in government. Again, that could be facilitated via the CIOB Academy. Finally, the final bullet point, in my opinion, an opportunity now arises to recalibrate the professional membership route to include a requirement to study environmental science in building and sustainable construction management. The time has now come to put environmental science and sustainability up front and centre for future professionals moving forward. The CIOB Global Sustainability Strategy should be able to, 1, explain the planet's social and environmental challenges. 2, understand and communicate the ethos of the United Nations goals. 3, understand the transition of the decarbonisation of the economic system as it impacts on the global built environment. 4, explain the CIOB's role and how it can be applied to global sustainable development. 5, embrace Goal 4, the learning goal, and target 4.7 via the CIOB Academy. Is the CIOB providing the necessary tools to help facilitate the goals? That's the question. In my opinion, there are 5 threats to the CIOB. First one is becoming sidelined. Everybody's moving forward and we're not moving fast enough. Another threat is missing opportunities. What's on our stakeholder map in adapting to climate change is the one. If we don't, we may be missing opportunities, strategic opportunities and tactical opportunities. I still firmly believe that we need to create new corporate membership for a world that is relevant and not that's already gone. And I say that in terms of we need to have professionals who understand what the issues are, technical, social, environmental, and be able to look over the horizon to help and facilitate and develop so that facilitation and facilitation services can be achieved as a strategic opportunity. The other threat is inertia. We need to change culture, attitudes and moral obligations to our children and grandchildren. I firmly believe that this is a threat that can be turned to the CIOB's strategic advantage by getting involved with schools, universities and tertiary education to bring out the message and strategically to attract new members. We need to get out there and walk the talk, for want of a better word. We need to be on the front foot, not on the back foot. And the final threat, in my opinion, is intellectual isolation. We have to be able to have a practical knowledge in terms of key management issues moving forward. We have to have influence, and it has to be a global influence. We have to develop areas of expertise. And the overall question is, are we providing the required professional development route and the required professional qualification route that actually will equip our members for the future and avert all these threats that are on this slide? Somebody once said, the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. And that's a key message for this slide. Goal 4 relates to a quality education. And the slide shows target 4.7. The CIOB has the capacity to facilitate this target via its commitment to its mission statement and values. The CIOB is rightly proud to be considered to be the international voice of the construction management professionals, representing an equal body of knowledge concerning the management of the total construction process. The CIOB Academy is well positioned to facilitate Goal 4, Target 4.7. These are global issues and requires the CIOB to adopt a key leadership role. The younger generation is interested and involved as primary stakeholders in sustainable development, which includes preventing a climate change disaster and being involved with adaptation and mitigation actions of change. They will have to live with this in the future. What's required is trust, communication and commitment. Trust that what we are doing as a professional global community is morally right. Effective communication of CIOB policies is paramount, and a commitment to deliver our policies. The CIOB's mission is to contribute to the creation of a modern, progressive and responsible construction industry, able to meet the economic, environmental and social challenges faced in the 21st century. The new moral compass will be an internalized set of values and objectives that guide us with regard to ethical behavior and decision making. This slide is a recap of how the CIOB should develop to embrace the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and is primarily focused on the millennial age, of CIOB global membership, for it is they that will have to deal and live with the consequences of our current climate change crisis. These CIOB members will have to have the knowledge and experience to deal with rapid economic and technological change like no other CIOB global membership cadre has had to deal with before. So what legacy will the current Chartered Institute of Building Global Community leave to future generations of our children and grandchildren? The challenge for CIOB policymakers is to address how existing policies can be mapped to the Sustainable Development Goal framework, and new policies to enhance the capacity of the CIOB to respond to requests for their collective experience and expertise in delivering the goals. Education, communication, facilitation and influence will be the key drivers in terms of CIOB policy development. Sustainability means meeting our own needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In addition to natural resources, we also need social and economic resources. Sustainability is not just environmentalism. Embedded in most definitions of sustainability, we also find concerns for social equity and economic development. The CIOB Global Sustainability Strategy should be able to, 1, explain the planet's social and environmental challenges, 2, understand the United Nations goals, 3, understand the transition of the economic system, and 4, explain the CIOB's role and how it can be applied to sustainable development. Quoting Ban Ki-moon, the former United Nations Secretary General, "We are the first generation that can end poverty and the last generation that can take steps to avoid the worst impacts of climate change." By mid-century, climate change could be just as deadly as COVID-19, and by 2100 it could be 5 times as deadly. In terms of economic impacts in the next decade or two, the economic damage caused by climate change will likely be as bad as having COVID-19 sized pandemics every 10 years. And by the end of the 21st century, it will be much worse if the world remains on its current emissions path. Sustainable development can be defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Goal 17, which is strengthen the means of implementation and revitalise the global partnership for sustained development, is the last but no means the least on the global goals agenda. It underpins the entire framework. The United Nations is clear that the goals can only be realised if an enabling environment for collaborative action is created. This should be adopted by the CIOB and its global professional membership in collaboration with its strategic partners and stakeholders. This should be the new moral compass within the CIOB corporate plan. Thank you for attending today's presentation. I hope that you have found it enlightening and thought-provoking. You have been a wonderful audience.
Let's thank David Stockdale in the time-honoured way for the clarity with which he set out the context of the goals, and in the second part, the robust but direct invitation to act. Thank you, David. And I will now gather the panel together. CIOB Director of Policy, Eddie Tuttle, CIOB Senior Vice President, Michael Yam, and the return of CIOB Policy Board member David Stockdale to answer your questions. So relax or get your fingers tapping, tap out those questions in the comment section, and you can vote them up if it enables you to, as we provide the responses in this Q&A period of our CIOB, Chartered Institute of Building Sustainable Development Goals policy discussion. So you can now unmute panel, speak to the points that are raised as concisely as possible, please. And also, if you have anything to add, then by all means come in. Without further ado, how about I ask the first question, or I ask a question, and does the construction industry have an imperative to train its executives and their organizations in the processes that are needed to do sustainable development goals well? And I think I'll ask Eddie to go first on that, please.
I think the short answer to that one, Kye, is yes, very much so. And I think one of the key drivers as we move forward will be how the professional bodies, CIOB included, actually help address a number of the qualifications and educational standards that there are around this whole agenda.
Thank you. And also yourself, Michael?
Yes, Kye, I concur with Eddie's view. I think we do have a significant role to play in terms of aligning ourselves as a professional institution to the greater agenda of ESG and SDG and all that. And by the way, before I sign off, what powerful sharing, David. I think you managed to make the subject much simpler to a lot of people. People have been talking about 17 SDGs and ESG and all that. And, you know, the way Jeffrey Sachs, Professor Jeffrey Sachs explained it, it's probably more meant for the academic and the intellectuals. But you've managed to summarize that pretty well. Thank you and kudos to you.
And that's a lovely segue to you, David.
I think basically that when I was asked to do this, it set off as a simple exercise by briefing the trustees, wasn't it, Eddie? And so the more I got into it, the more I realised as a fellow, and I've been a fellow for a long time, just how remiss I've been in catching up with what's actually happening across the world. So the more I got into it, the more I added to it, the more I was interested in it, but always understanding what the potential audience could be. And that potential audience that I keep banging on is the fact that we ought to be literally stepping out of our comfort zone and getting into schools, getting into education and saying, look, we can help. You've only got to look at the news, especially yesterday. All these schools having projects regarding sustainable development, climate change, lack of biodiversity. So for me, it's imperative to educate ourselves, our executives, but also the school children.
Fantastic. And PricewaterhouseCoopers make the point that only 1% of companies provide qualitative sustainable development goal information because, as the point you made, David, of their ignorance of the goals. What work do you feel the CIOB currently undertake to equip the industry with the knowledge to do sustainable development goals well? And that's to Eddie first, please.
Well, I think we've actually done quite a lot of work in relation to the UN sustainability goals. If I look at some of the work we've done in the recent past around modern slavery, for instance, I think that's very much in line with the UN sustainability goals and was part of active discussions as well with the UN at that particular time. I think where I would come at this, Kye, is that we need to actually ensure that we have a working knowledge of the UN sustainability goals, Personally, I don't think all 17 goals are a key priority. I think what you can do is segment the goals into a framework which actually then gives you the kudos and the integrated way forward in terms of how you would actually engage with those at a global level. And remembering, when you take the global agenda as well, what's happening at state level and federal level in some countries as well, we're going to have to take slightly different approaches. I don't think we've got a one fits all size ability to achieve that at the moment, but that's something that I'm seriously looking at as part of our overall policy impact and future policy positioning.
Lovely. And Michael and David, feel free to add to what Eddie has said.
Kye, the 17 SDG, UN SDG, is a bit like when Moses came down with the tablet and the 10 Commandments. Very easy to look at, and when you come to practice, it's fraught with a lot of challenges and difficulties. So when you put the 17 SDGs and you try to apply it one size fits all throughout the globe, and in particular to the countries where our members are present, then you find that it is all about balancing the tensions of each of these goals. So we talk about nearer to home when we talk about the issue of the pandemic. It's life versus livelihood, right? You can lock everyone in the house, almost zero infection, but then you have people dying in the street. So I can think of so many of these goals, some of which are actually in tension with one another. We talk about, ecological way of disposing waste, proper way of, if you like, reducing the amount of waste. Yet, if we look at Indonesia, a country of 200 million people, slash and burn is very much alive. If the people didn't go slash and burn, and they hardly have access to education, nor satellite, nor news around the world, they would die of hunger. And that has caused, of course, a lot of smoke problem throughout the ASEAN countries, right? And then you look at the corruption index. We all know in some of the countries in ASEAN, you're basically given a almost non-survivable salary, but it's understood that they would take garnishment, if you like, from offenders, like the police. Not a lot of difference from the waiter in a New York restaurant who expects his pay to be paid by tips, right? So where do you draw the line? So it's about balancing lots of tension. I can mention so many tension here that, it becomes quite, you really need to work on it. I mean, you talk about decent work, right? Proper pay for the Midwest and USA, but yet they rely on Chinese cheap labor to provide the goods. But for the Chinese, it's not cheap labor because their cost of living is much lower. The state takes care of all their needs, and they don't need the sort of a disposable income that the more developed countries are used to. So there's lots of things that we need to deal with. As I say, it's Moses' 10 Commandments, which now in today's current situation we call it. You got to temper it with grace, right? Thanks.
No, thank you. And the next question, which leads on really nicely from what you've been saying. So, where do you think are the biggest commercial opportunities for construction companies and the various people that work in the built environment when we look at those that are embracing sustainable development goals? Where do you think the main opportunities are, Michael?
Well, I think firstly it has to be the West. I remember some 20 years ago when, well, maybe not so far back, maybe 15 years ago, when I was on a board of trustee, I can't remember which minister, he was really talking about zero carbon. And that time, it wasn't so much of the green agenda. It was the fact that new build wasn't creating enough, business opportunity for the contracting world. So in a way, by introducing zero carbon, there were lots of job opportunities and work opportunities for, new build, not new build, but actually the renovation sector, the upgrading sector and whatever you, so that you would now need to comply with, if you like, the new building regulations and so on and so forth. That has moved on, I think. And now, of course, we have the new, whatever is going to come up from COP26 is something which the more developed countries is more likely to abide to, because, they are wealthier than the developing and emerging countries.
And David, do you have anything to add to that in terms of the commercial opportunities for us in the construction sector?
Yeah, I think basically there are opportunities for every sector moving forward, in my opinion. There has to be. And any commercial enterprise deals with commercial strategy as part of its overall strategy. And when you think about the global impacts of post-COP26, for example, we're not going to solve the world's problems by relying on energy systems that reduce emissions. That's only one part of three elements, I think. The second element is innovation. Well, it's innovation, and I'm coming on to SDG 17, the 17th goal. It's multi-stakeholder partnerships, and that leads on to multi-stakeholder investments. And just to give you an example about innovation, it's not just talking about modular construction, although that is a very, very important. We were doing modular construction in Saudi Arabia 40 years ago, right? And that's because of individual circumstances on a project. But it's not all about making energy efficient. It has to involve innovation. And an example of innovation and investment, I think currently in Iceland, there's a couple of companies tapping into the geothermal aspects of innovation, but also direct air capture. There's a direct air capture plant the size of a small school, which can do the work of a forest as big as a fair-sized town. So there is stuff that we are going to get involved with as an industry, as a sector, that we can only dream about. And if we're talking about the next 30 years, think about how far we've come along in innovation in the last 30 years. And at the end of the day, where was BIM, 5-10 years ago? So at the end of the day, there's plenty of commercial opportunities. I think you just have the mindset to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with that, David. I think the key issue will be our RMI and remedial work to get our current building stock up to the right standard. And there's a huge opportunity there. And that's very much a commitment, not just in the UK, but across many governments around the world. I think innovation is a key driver as well. And, in terms of innovation, I would actually say, and David touched on it in his presentation, it's also about the finance markets and the finance investment as well for the future. So I see the industry working a lot more closely on the innovation side with, the financial institutions, not just the banks, but other investors, pension funds, et cetera, And there's a huge opportunity there, I think, to change the industry. And let's remember in the UK as well that a key driver of government strategy for the industry is that it does need to innovate, not just around sustainability, but the way it does business more generally. And government are not going to step back from that challenge. In fact, they will use zero carbon as one of the drivers to make us do it.
Thank you. And this point of innovation, the innovation side and industry change. I mean, what do you think in terms of coronavirus? What do you think that tells us about our industry's ability to work together as appears necessary to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals? So we've got that unity, and we're looking at these issues of innovation and change. So it seems as though we've got a balance there, but what's your view? And that one is to Eddie. You go first on that one.
I mean, that's a pretty loaded question, and a good question, Kye, actually. I think COVID is actually showing that the industry can come together. Certainly, the focus now with government, particularly in the UK, is very much around how do we actually unify and jointly deliver the right kinds of strategies, and that includes net zero. So from my perspective, I think COVID has actually made the case economically for the industry and its importance. And I think a number of the other issues that we need to touch on as well around reskilling and bringing the right people into the industry to do the jobs required in the future are now very much front and centre of the policy thinking that's going on at the centre. So for me, huge opportunity, and actually helps again to deliver the right kind of framework that we can play from.
And Michael and David, if you have anything to add. Michael, unmute, please.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I possibly I can share some realities that is learned from the pandemic issue in Malaysia. I think in terms of advancements of technology and building techniques and innovation, we are probably midway between the developed nation and those less developed. And really, in some way, we have been caught off guard. And the government and the industry is actually backpedaling. In Malaysia, some 2 million, we have about 4 million migrant workers out of 13 million working population, right? And in the construction industry, which employs about 1 million people, I would imagine probably 800,000 of these people are actually migrant workers. So we would have the workers from Bangladesh, from Indonesia, from Vietnam, coming into Malaysia to work in the construction industry because no one really wants to work in the industry, the locals, right? And when this pandemic caught up, it's a bit like the seawater receding, right? It shows all the ugliness. Number one, a lot of them were staying in very informal housing on their own. And the fact that they're not centralized, right, increases the risk of infection tremendously, not only amongst themselves, but also amongst the locals, right? A lot of them are highly qualified professionals, including CIOB project managers, right? So that suddenly surfaces the issue. And of course, now government is regulating it, centralized labor quarters and whatever. So the good thing that comes out of this now is that we have to now upgrade the standards of accommodation. The next is the government relaxes the lockdown, but with conditions such that only 40% of personnel can be on site to work, or 60%, or depending on the time frame. You suddenly realize that heavy mechanization needs to come in, right? I would imagine in 10 years' time, we'll be talking about the innovation that David was talking about, because you need heftier machine, more advanced machine to replace this labor, and such labor, migrant laborers, not only presents a social problem, but also a security problem. So again, I'm going back to the tension that I was talking about. You got economic reality too, right? When as you bring in import, heavy machines, good innovation, someone has to pay for that. But is the market, the reality, the market, the consumer, the one who buys the property, the institution that's going to occupy those buildings that they have funded, are they prepared to pay a higher price for that? So there's a whole host of stakeholder engagement and stakeholder reality that needs to be dealt with before we can move forward. So those are the challenges that I would like to share.
And that's a slightly different challenge wherever you are in the globe as well, or around the globe. Is that they're not all just one challenge, and I think that's the nuanced discussion that actually will be very interesting in the future, Michael.
Yeah. But having said that, I would say, again, as I said, we are about mid-level. So what we are seeing now is the CIDB, Construction Industry Development Board, starting to specify accommodation standards, the SOPs and what have you. But in the latest budget, we had our budget on Friday. They probably look at Sunak Rishi's budget and try and follow that maybe. But I noticed there's one particular item. This is the 10 billion ringgit, which is roughly about maybe about 1.5, 1.6 billion, what we call green bond, that the Ministry of Finance basically is facilitating. This will be through the banks, obviously, where the banks will be given that money. It's for them now to lend to sectors that presumably has a green agenda. That might imagine preferred rates and certain incentives would be given. So that's a good start. Government firstly recognizing that they need to do it, but maybe through baby steps. And I think this is where institutions such as CIOB could come in and give it a little nudge and a little push, because government also needs to listen to what the market, listen to global influencers and shapers, what are they saying? And I think, between Eddie, myself, CIOB, maybe there's a possibility that once a template is set up in UK, we could amend it and adapt to the various countries and say, we are the champions for the construction industry. Never mind the architects, engineers or not, they can do the specification, but we are the guys who are the intermediaries between the designers and the client, right? And the client. I think Mike Foy agenda being the client as the agenda for our presidency probably couldn't come at a better time. We are the intermediaries.
Now, I can tell that we could go on for some time, but we're coming to the end of our Q&A. And a concise answer to the following question from Mohammed, please. And Mohammed says, what's your view on the role of the CIOB in sustainability-led vision rather than a building-led vision? And I think he's been listening very carefully to the words that have been said, and maybe considering whether there needs to be an adjustment, especially the words that David had said in the presentation. So I'll ask that question again. What's your view on the role of the CIOB in sustainability as a sustainability-led vision rather than a building-led vision? A concise answer, please. And that goes to David.
I think basically one of the first steps that everybody's got to engage with is education. There's a lot of people and probably a lot of members who have different views on what sustainability is. So in answering the question of the role of the CIOB in a sustainability-led vision will depend on different global memberships and different countries. For example, the Sustainable Development Goals is pretty dedicated to be a strategy that is pro-growth. And to change the existing vision of the CIOB, which is basically led by the Royal Charter. And if you think about what the Royal Charter says, it includes science, it includes working for the public interest. So basically, if you say, what's your view on the role of the CIOB in sustainability? They've got to be leaders. In order to be leaders, they've got to have the membership who are educated on what sustainability is, with a common vision that everybody can actually respond to. And bearing in mind that we are a global membership with 120 countries, correct me if I'm wrong, but every country will have a different vision on sustainability. So it's a bit like being a meta policy, META, taking the book from Facebook, in terms of the CIOB HQ ought to be a centre of excellence. It should be a centre of learning, should be a centre of actually best practice and learning lessons, and then disseminated that back to the global membership. So the role is visionary leader in terms of what we need to do. Buildings come under that vision. But we're also talking about infrastructure. We're also talking about community development. And part of building and construction is part of building communities, because that's the main reason why it exists. So I know it's a bit rambling, but that's my best shot.
Thank you very much, David. As I come towards the end of the Q&A, I confess that I carry a rather heavy burden. I have the highest examination score in the world. There's only a handful of globally registered international certified sustainability professionals, and it includes SDGs. And everything you had on your lovely diagram at slide 61, right up my street. But that's for another day. Now I'm going to ask a quick poll question. And that poll question is this. And you will hear the countdown clock. For anyone that's not familiar, you get 30 seconds to answer this question. So I've been clear. The question is, do governments need to work harder on policy and public investment to enable us in the industry to deliver green built environments? I hope the poll question is going to come up. If it doesn't, I'll move on and we can ask that question elsewhere in our sessions. The countdown clock has started. Now, people can quite obviously enter their answers in the comments anyway. So the question was one of, do governments need to work harder on policy and public investment to enable us in the industry to deliver green built environments? So just feed that one through. Now, team, there being no further time for questions, even though there are some more that I'd quite like to ask you, what we should do is thank our speaker and our panel in the time-honoured way. And I would also like to thank our members for the stimulating excellence of the questions that were asked. Now, as we enter the final closing period, I must say how promising it is to see so many members attending today's event to discuss how the CIOB can implement the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I see the value captured by organisations that I've trained and supported when they gain competitive advantage, favourable access to capital, and they do this whilst gaining market share through their learning in sustainability. As David's presentation showed, Sustainable Development Goals are an all-encompassing drive to end global poverty, to improve health, to improve education, to generate economic growth, to reduce inequality, and of course, tackle climate change. I'm sure we can all agree that these are global imperatives, and it is exciting and at the same time important for the CIOB to facilitate progress towards each of the goals. The past year has highlighted several areas where we as an industry and also as a society must collaborate to meet new challenges. Construction has long been a place of excellence, and recently we have shown that the industry is more than capable of working together to respond and continue through even a global pandemic. We must put this energy into ensuring that the built environment tackles the UN Sustainable Development Goals, making a better place both now and for future generations. Given the complexities of the task that we face, we can't just rely on individuals within the industry to lead us, a few heroes. We must not be naive, and we must not avoid taking action and then comment, well, we've made some progress, but there's still a lot more to do. This still a lot more to do, that there is a sign of failure. So the call to action is get energized and have ambition. And the moral and the business imperative is with you, supported by the national position as well as the global position. Failure will be collective. People and future generations will look at empty promises and those that exploited loopholes to do nothing. Lawyers and people, and never, ever, ever underestimate the people. Look to professional bodies like the CIOB and governments to lend their support to small and large companies to address the action, the changes that need to be made by us all pulling together. The UN Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP26, is currently underway. I'll be speaking there on climate change, waste and human rights, and the CIOB is actively engaged in various discussions with UK policymakers. We act to close the gap between the world as it is and the world as it needs to be. Members, we work hard at the CIOB to support and advise a progressive industry, providing buildings, infrastructure and public realm, advancing on the challenges that we face. The CIOB Academy at www.ciobacademy.org provides training focused on making companies more profitable and fit for purpose to meet the current industry's needs. At this time, however, a sustainable development goal and reporting leadership module understandably needs to be added. It is important we get this done to not get left behind, and there should be no excuses. And whilst we're talking about helping ourselves as well as helping others, remember the CIOB has a benevolent fund that provides a service to support our members that find themselves in difficult circumstances for reasons of hardship or mental health and simply not know where to turn. All inquiries are treated in complete confidence. You can just go to www.ciobbenevolentfund.org.uk. For those wishing to support their colleagues, as we approach the season of goodwill to all women and men, you can donate to the Benevolent Fund at that same website. Just click the green button and donate. And may I thank you in advance for your generosity, and I'd also like to thank you for attending. Now, before I hand back to our Chief Executive, Kye Gbangbola, I'd like to ask the panel, do you have any final points? David?
No, I think it's, I've stated a lot in the presentation. I've thought about it a lot. And in terms of the recommendations that the presentation made, I still have not changed my view to when I was producing it. And basically, I believe that the way forward for the CIOB is Goal 4 in terms of education and Goal 17 in terms of multi-stakeholder partnerships. That's my initial wish list, if you like. The rest will follow, but it can only follow. I think there's an African proverb: if you want to go quickly, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. That's the message I want to leave.
Lovely. And Eddie and Michael, as quick as you're able, please. Any final points?
Just very quickly, I think it's not just about governments, it's about the industries as well, or the industry as well, and it's how we collaborate and work together that will actually achieve those goals.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what David says. It's very similar. A journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. I think CIOB is probably somewhere between 100 and 1,000 steps already. We haven't started from zero, ground zero. Talking about not walking alone, I think all the stakeholders, the government, the private sector, the public sector, even to the individual, as was mentioned earlier, the millennials, and also those in school, need to work in tandem. I think no one can move any faster than the other, but as a group, because of reality, the economic reality, it's out there. What can the market support and sustain? So that's my few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, team. And from me, Salus Populi Suprema Lex Esto. Let the welfare of the people be the supreme law. And that's very much our industry's tradition. And that's how we leave no one behind. I'd like to thank you all, and I am now handing back to Caroline Gumbel to close the discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. And how do I follow that? What an inspiring and impactful session. Thank you so very much. And to all of you, I know you do an enormous amount behind the scenes to help us, and we are listening. And of course, we will continue this most important strategic mission. Ray, thank you very much. Ray has put the link in for our CIOB assist. So thank you very much for raising that, Kye. So as we're coming up for us in the UK to a lunchtime, Kye, David, Eddie and Michael, thank you so very, very much. We are going to be taking a break now, and we will be back live at 13:15 GMT with a panel discussion, and it's talented critical challenges and opportunities that the built environment faces in a post-pandemic world. We have a fantastic lineup of panelists for this event, so I do hope we're able to see you along with us at 1:15 GMT. Thank you again.